Hello, my friend. I can't tell you how much it means to me that you're here, listening to this. And if you choose to follow my channel, that would mean the world. Truly. All right, let's begin. Have you ever heard someone laugh so hard it felt like a slap straight across your face? I hadn't, at least not until that night. The party was ridiculous, even by Tampa's usual chaos. Palm trees strung with fairy lights swayed above a pool fit for a glossy magazine spread. Music pulsed through the deck, deep enough to rattle teeth and bones. I was halfway through a weak whiskey when I heard it, the laugh I could recognize over anything. Madison, my wife. She was across the patio, wearing that emerald backless dress, the one that guaranteed every head would turn. She stood in the middle of her friends, the circle tilted toward her like she was some queen holding court, faces shiny with wine and shallow approval. And then I heard her say it, crisp, cutting, like glass splintering in my hands. It's better to deal with it alone than have him in my bed. The laughter that followed was cruel, too loud, too long. One of them even clapped. That's when Chloe, Madison's younger sister, softer and quieter than the rest, finally spoke. "He's amazing," she said, barely more than a whisper, but it sliced through the noise like a bell tolling midnight. The laughter stopped, just gone. I don't remember crossing the patio. Don't remember putting down my drink or unclenching my fists. What I do remember is standing in their little circle, staring Madison down, feeling the oxygen vanish from the night. "You've got quite the talent for comedy, huh?" My voice was steady, too steady. Her gaze flicked up, bored. "Adam, don't start. You really think making a joke about your husband in bed is prime girls' night entertainment?" Someone tried to chuckle, smooth it over. "Wrong move." "Go on," I said louder. "Say it again. Let the whole backyard hear how miserable you are with me. Or is it only funny when I'm not standing here?" Her smile slipped. "You're making a scene," she muttered, low and sharp. But I saw it, the flash of panic in her eyes. I stepped closer. "Number you made the scene. I'm just making sure everyone sees the ending." She rolled her eyes, her favorite weapon when cornered. "God, you're so sensitive." "You humiliate me in public and I'm the sensitive one?" Around us, the circle dissolved. People scattered, coughing, laughing nervously, heels tapping toward safety. Everyone except Chloe. She stayed rooted next to me, silent but solid, like a line someone had drawn in sand. I turned toward her. Something inside me broke, or maybe finally opened. I reached for her hand, not rough, not desperate, just steady. And together, without a word, we walked out. Behind us, the patio lights burned like an accusing spotlight. Beyond the gate, the air hung thick with Florida humidity and something heavier. Disbelief. We didn't look back. I used to think my life was steady, predictable in a middle-class way, two-story house in Tampa, morning jogs, late-night reruns. Madison was electric, ambitious, always running 3 steps ahead. I was the anchor, quiet, dependable. Her mother once called me the good one. I worked construction management. I liked blueprints. I liked things you could measure, things that stayed where you put them. Madison liked chaos. She made friends quickly, burned through hobbies faster. For years, I believed our differences balanced each other out. But over time, something shifted. Slowly at first, then all at once. The past year blurred into missed dinners, silence sharp enough to cut, and conversations that felt more like negotiations than love. And that night? That was the wrecking ball through the last wall holding it all together. But the real surprise came later, from Chloe. The silence in my car didn't feel anything like the silence we'd left behind. This one was soft, clean, like air after a storm finally breaks. Chloe sat in the passenger seat replaying what she'd said at the party. "He's amazing! Who even says that?" She groaned, burying her face in her hands, laughing at herself. "I sounded 12. I glanced over at her, and for the first time all night I laughed too. A real laugh, not the kind you fake to keep the peace. "Honestly," I said, pulling away from the curb, "it saved me. Might be the nicest thing anyone said to me in weeks." Chloe smiled, but her eyes carried something else. Guilt, maybe. Like honesty had slipped out without permission. But there was no pity there. Just warmth. The rare kind you can't fake. We drove through quiet Tampa streets, windows cracked to the night air, salt, citrus, and something faintly like new beginnings, even if I wasn't ready to believe in them yet. Madison's always been... Chloe paused, choosing her words like stepping stones across broken glass. Well, you know how she is. I nodded. Yeah, I know. We didn't speak after that. The radio stayed off. The city blurred past in neon smears and headlights. When I pulled up to her apartment, she unbuckled slowly, like she wasn't quite ready to leave. Truth was, neither was I, not out of romance or drama, but because the quiet felt real, realer than anything I'd felt in months. Before stepping out, she turned to me. "You're not alone in this," she said, "and you're not crazy. She's been playing both sides for a long time." The words hit harder than I expected. "Thanks," I managed, my throat tight. She rummaged through her purse, tore a receipt in half, scribbled something on it, and handed it to me. "My number," she said, "in case you need someone to tell you the truth sometimes." And then she was gone. Just like that. Fading into the soft gold glow of her porch light. I sat there a long while, engine idling, her words hanging in the air like perfume. "You're not crazy." Funny how badly I'd needed to hear that. Funnier still that it came from Chloe, the one person in Madison's orbit who never really fit there. Finally, I killed the engine. The night felt calm, not just outside, but inside me too. For the first time in months, I wasn't bracing for the next jab, the next cold silence, the next silent war. There was quiet. The good kind. The kind that lets you breathe again. Somewhere deep down, I understood this wasn't just another fight. This was the one that would change everything. The following morning, I woke to the harsh crash of dishes. Not the lazy clinking of a quiet Sunday, but the kind of noise that carries a message. I'm still angry. In the kitchen, Madison stood barefoot, hair tangled, wearing an old sleep shirt. She slammed a mug onto the counter hard enough to make the sugar jar tremble. Her back was to me, but I didn't need to see her face to know what storm brewed inside her. I didn't say a word, just leaned against the doorframe and waited. "You humiliated me," she said evenly, still facing the counter. "In front of everyone I know." I breathed out through my nose. "Yeah? You humiliated me first." That made her spin around. Her eyes sparked. "It was a joke." "No," I said, voice low. "It was a punchline, and I was the punchline." Her arms crossed tight over her chest, her defiance sharp as glass. "You're always like this," she snapped. "Wounded. Overly serious. Maybe if you didn't walk around like some broken puppy, people wouldn't—" "Wouldn't what?" I stepped forward. "Wouldn't laugh? Wouldn't whisper? Wouldn't treat their own husband like he doesn't exist?" She stared at me like I'd crossed a line I wasn't allowed to cross. "I'm done," I muttered, brushing past her toward the hall. "Oh, so now you're the victim?" she shouted after me. "Running off with my sister like some misunderstood saint?" That stopped me dead. I turned back slowly, deliberately. "You don't get to talk about loyalty," I said quietly. "Not when you use it as a weapon." "I never cheated," she shot back, but there was a tremor in her voice. "I never said you did," I replied. "But whatever this is," I gestured between us, "it isn't a marriage anymore." For the briefest second, something flickered across her face. Fear, confusion, maybe both, but it vanished before I could name it. "You're overreacting," she murmured. "You're tired. We'll talk when you've cooled down." "No," I said simply. "We won't." I went to the bedroom, pulled out the dusty weekend bag from the closet, and began packing. A few shirts, some jeans, my charger. Nothing major. Just enough to walk away without feeling like I was sneaking out in shame. Madison stood frozen in the doorway, arms limp at her sides, staring like I was some stranger who'd broken into her house. "You're actually leaving?" she whispered. "Over one stupid joke?" I zipped the bag, slung it over my shoulder, and met her eyes. "This isn't about one joke," I said. "It's about every time I let you make me one." Her mouth opened, but no words came. The silence was heavier than any screaming could have been. I walked past her. The house felt colder than ever, sterile, hollow, already practicing life without me. On the counter, the mug she'd slammed earlier sat cracked down one side. Not shattered, but broken in a way that couldn't be fixed. I didn't slam the door, didn't yell. I just stepped outside and closed it quietly. Sometimes silence leaves deeper scars than shouting ever could. It started with whispers, not actual whispers, but texts. The vague kind you get when people know something you don't. "Hey man, you all right?" Connor was the first to send one. Then Marie. Then someone from my old job who hadn't spoken to me in years. People who normally stayed silent unless something big was circulating. And something was definitely circulating. At first I brushed it off. The party had been chaos. Gossip was inevitable. Madison's little joke probably traveled faster than the music that night. But by the second day, the tone shifted. She didn't leave by herself, did she? Was it that guy in the black polo? Thought I saw her with... Forget it. Pretend I didn't say anything. Pretend I didn't say anything. No one ever really means that. So I didn't pretend. I followed the trail, not out of jealousy, but because I needed answers, quietly, carefully, like pulling a splinter before it festers. Didn't take long. A friend of a friend mentioned Madison showing up to work Monday, all smiles, fake yawns, bragging about a late-night wind-down with some finance guy she knew from college. She never said my name. Then came the photo, grainy, dimly lit, sent by someone I hadn't heard from since our wedding. Madison on a patio, leaning too close to a man I didn't recognize. His hand hovered behind her back. Not touching, but it didn't need to. But it wasn't the photo that broke me. It was the voice memo. Chloe sent it. "Wasn't sure if you should hear this," she wrote. "But I don't want you in the dark." The recording was muffled, probably captured in a bathroom or hallway, but Madison's voice cut through unmistakable. I mean, what was I supposed to do? He's nice, sure, safe. But God, I was bored. At least Trevor actually knows how to talk to a woman. Then laughter. Not cruel, but dismissive, like I'd become a faded photograph she couldn't be bothered to hang on the wall anymore. I played it twice, no more. There was no rage, no screaming, just stillness, like someone had flipped a switch on a machine that had been overheating too long. That was the shift. Not in my gut, not even in my heart, but in my spine. I stood straighter, breathed slower, because now I wasn't guessing anymore. I knew. Madison had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, and no apology, no excuse, no performance could undo it. This wasn't just betrayal, it was revelation. The woman I married had become a stranger. The same woman who once swore I was her home now mocked that very home behind my back. Fine. She could keep the house. I was going to build something new, and this time it wouldn't be for her. The bar was almost empty. Exactly what I needed. No pounding music, no crowd, just the low hum of conversation and the occasional clink of glass. Connor had picked the spot, some forgotten dive off Bay Shore, walls cluttered with rusted license plates and a bartender who looked like he could read your life story from your posture. I hadn't spoken much since sitting down, just nursed my drink, watching ice melt slow and steady. Connor finally broke the silence. "So she really said that? At the party?" I nodded, staring into the glass. And more. Apparently, he let out a low whistle, leaning back on his stool. "You always defended her, man, even when the rest of us didn't." "I know." My voice was flat. "That's what hurts the most. Not the betrayal, not the gossip or the proof. It's remembering how hard I fought for her, how many excuses I made, how many times I twisted reality just to protect her image." Connor studied me for a long moment, then asked the question I'd been avoiding. "Do you still love her?" I didn't answer right away. Because love doesn't always vanish when trust does. Sometimes it lingers, like smoke clinging to clothes, faint, bitter, impossible to scrub out completely. "I don't think I love the person she's become," I said finally, voice low, "but I can't stop grieving the version of her I thought was real." Connor tilted his head, considering. "That's understandable." He didn't push, didn't offer platitudes or demand explanations, just let the silence stretch between us like an open field. I was grateful for that. Some friends can't bear quiet. They scramble to fill it with advice, outrage, anything to smooth the edges. But Connor knew better. He understood that sometimes you need the stillness, even if it stings. My phone buzzed against the tabletop. I picked it up, half expecting another bitter text from Madison or maybe a missed call from a relative who couldn't help but meddle. Instead, it was Chloe. "Hope you're okay. If you need company or a bad joke, I'm around." For reasons I couldn't name, that message hit harder than anything else all night. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't trying to fix me. It was soft, simple, like someone quietly offering their hand across a frozen lake. I stared at the screen for a long moment before finally typing back, "Thanks. I needed that." Connor glanced at the name over my shoulder. "She's solid," he said, "not like Madison." I didn't reply, because it wasn't about better or worse. It was about contrast, how Chloe somehow made me feel seen without demanding anything in return. The rest of the evening drifted by in an easy rhythm. We talked about the Bucks, about work, about the time Connor nearly set his dorm on fire making bacon in a toaster oven back in college. Ordinary conversation, the kind I hadn't realized I'd been starving for. Later, when I stepped outside, the air didn't feel so heavy anymore. The night sky was still dark, but it wasn't crushing. I sat in my car, hands resting on the wheel, and just breathed. Things weren't fixed, not even close, but for the first time in months, I remembered what it felt like to exhale without flinching. And maybe strangest of all, I didn't feel completely alone. Divorce is a strange thing. People think it's all courtrooms and documents, signatures and deadlines. But really, it's the slow dismantling of everyday habits. You stop pouring 2 cups of coffee. You stop checking your phone at lunch. You stop hoping. But in that hollow space, something unexpected starts to grow. I wasn't racing toward anything new. I wasn't hunting for a rebound. I was learning how to rebuild. Some days that meant long walks through quiet neighborhoods, letting the sun hit my face without overthinking. Other nights it was late drives with the windows cracked, the hum of tires on pavement reminding me that stillness could be a choice, not a cage. And then there was Chloe. It started quietly. A walk at Ballast Point Park. She wore a faded denim jacket, hair tied back, a watered-down iced coffee in her hand as she told me about her third graders. I hadn't even known she taught kids until then. "They're chaos," she laughed, "but the kind that's good for you, like glitter, messy, impossible to contain, but somehow magical." I remember laughing too, really laughing, for the first time in months. She didn't ask me to bare my soul, but I found myself doing it anyway. I told her how I used to sketch houses when I was a kid, how I ended up in construction because I liked building things meant to last. "That's kind of heavy," she said softly, "considering everything." "Yeah," I smiled faintly. Ironic, right? Later, we ended up at this tiny diner off Bayshore, cracked red booths, waitresses who called you hon no matter how tired you looked. She ordered pancakes for dinner. I got coffee and pie. We talked about nothing and everything. Her childhood crush on a boy who could juggle oranges, my obsession with old horror films, the time I slipped on a crab at the beach and pretended it was on purpose. It was the most alive I'd felt in a long time. Soon it became a pattern. Quiet walks through sleepy streets, late-night texts about terrible movies, silences that didn't cut, but healed. One night, sitting on the hood of my car by the water, city haze softening the stars, Chloe kicked off her shoes and asked, "You know what I like about you?" I smirked. "Do I want to know?" "You don't panic when things get quiet. Most people do. You let it breathe." I looked up at the sky. "That's new for me. I used to think silence meant something was about to break." She nudged my shoulder gently. "And now it feels like space, like there's room." We didn't kiss that night. Not yet. But something shifted. Not tension exactly. More like understanding. She wasn't a rebound. I wasn't her project. We were just 2 people learning how not to flinch at the light anymore. The paperwork kept moving, slow and steady. Madison and I exchanged only the bare essentials: bills, the house, logistics. No emotions left. just business, and I didn't chase it. Not anymore. Because every evening with Chloe felt like tying new threads where old ones had frayed. Not replacing what had been lost, building something new. And this time, I wasn't building alone. It happened on a Thursday night, not with fireworks, but with quiet. A pause that said more than any kiss could. We were at Chloe's apartment, small but warm, shelves crowded with dog-eared paperbacks, a single candle flickering on the windowsill. Soft jazz played from an old speaker that hiccuped every few songs. Dinner had been Thai takeout, forgotten now. A half-finished bottle of wine sat between us. We'd been talking for hours, sipping only occasionally. She sat cross-legged on the couch in an oversized sweater, hair loose for once. And I remember thinking, not in a cliched way, but real, that she looked like what home was supposed to feel like. "So," she asked, rolling the stem of her glass between her fingers, "what do you miss most?" I hesitated. "About what?" "Before all this," she said, "before everything broke." I thought for a long moment, not about the fights or the tension, not about Madison's polished version of love. "I miss feeling like somebody actually knew me," I said quietly. Or at least pretended well enough to make me believe it. Chloe didn't try to fix it. She just nodded, her eyes steady on mine. "What about you?" I asked. She smiled faintly, sadness tucked beneath it. "I miss not bracing for disappointment." Her words landed heavier than I expected. We sat in silence for a long moment. Not awkward, just honest. Permission to sit with what hurt. At some point, I leaned closer, not rushed, not planned, just closer, until our knees touched. Chloe's voice was barely a whisper. "You don't have to kiss me, you know." "I know. But if you do," her eyes flicked to mine, "don't do it just to forget her." My chest thudded. "I'm not." And then I kissed her. It wasn't frantic or hollow. It wasn't about erasing anyone else. It was careful, slow, like lighting a candle in the dark and letting your eyes adjust to the glow. She tasted like wine and something softer I couldn't name. When we finally pulled apart, she rested her forehead against mine and exhaled. Later, we ended up on the couch, wrapped in that fragile in-between where words feel too small and everything hums louder than silence. Her head on my chest, my fingers tracing lazy lines along her arm. A kind of quiet you don't find in the middle of storms. And that night, for the first time, I didn't think about Madison, or the house, or the paperwork. In that moment, I let myself just exist next to someone who demanded nothing. No explanations, no proof, no performance. We drifted into sleep like that, our limbs tangled, a candle burning low on the windowsill until it finally gave out. For the first time in what felt like forever, I woke up without the familiar weight of regret. I woke up beside her, and for the first time, it felt like something true was just beginning. By the time I arrived at her place, the door was already ajar. It felt as though she had been waiting, ear pressed to the wood, counting my footsteps in the hallway, bracing herself for what came next. "Adam," she whispered as she stepped aside, her voice cracking before I'd even crossed the threshold. The scent inside was the same, citrus, clean linen, but the space itself felt foreign now, hollow, staged, like it belonged to neither of us. She stood barefoot, wearing worn leggings and an old college sweatshirt, hair tied up in a messy knot like sleep had abandoned her days ago. Her eyes were puffy, though I couldn't tell if it was from tears or exhaustion or both. I didn't speak. I simply placed a folder on the kitchen table. Her gaze locked on it as though touching it might burn her. "What's that?" she murmured, though she already knew. "Divorce papers," I said, my voice steady. "It's time." A single laugh burst out of her, sharp, brittle, echoing against the kitchen tiles before dissolving into silence. "You're serious?" "I've been serious for weeks, Madison. You've been acting like if you just ignored it, it would all disappear." Her eyes dropped, then rose again, trembling. "I didn't think you'd really go through with it. You're not that person." "No," I said, folding my arms across my chest. But you turned me into him. Something inside her cracked. She slammed her hand against the table hard enough to make the folder jump. I gave you everything, she shouted. I stayed. I tried. You don't get to rewrite everything because I made mistakes. I didn't move. It wasn't one mistake, Madison. It was the same mistake, over and over. She started pacing, twisting her fingers into her hair. You didn't even fight for us. I breathed out slowly. I fought every time I held my tongue instead of speaking. Every time I let things slide. Every time I tried to make peace with your silence. But this? Laughing at me in front of everyone and walking out with someone else? Her eyes filled instantly. That wasn't, she started. It was, I cut her off. Don't twist it into something cleaner than it was. She stopped cold. I didn't think it would ever come to this, she whispered. I nodded. You never do. And just like that, her defenses crumbled. She sank to the floor, her sobs tearing out of her like something primal, ripped straight from the chest rather than the throat. I didn't mean to lose you, she choked out between breaths. I was lonely. I thought if I hurt you, maybe you'd notice me again. I lowered myself onto the floor beside her, folding my legs, resting my palms on my knees. I didn't reach for her. I noticed you, Madison, I said quietly. For a long time I noticed you. You just never looked back. Her eyes found mine, raw, drenched, pleading. You're really going through with this? I gave one small nod. Chloe's pregnant. The words split the air like a thunderclap. She made a sound, half scream, half gasp, covering her face with both hands, shaking her head as though denial might rewind the moment. No, she's just a rebound. She's not, I said softly. She's the first person who saw me and didn't turn it into ammunition. Madison's crying quieted, not from relief, but from resignation. A hollow ache replaced the fight. Without a word, she stood, walked to the counter, picked up a pen. She signed the papers. No bargaining, no last attempt at negotiation, just ink on paper. When she slid the folder back to me, her hand trembled. I took it, nodded once, and moved toward the door. Adam, she rasped behind me. Does she love you? My hand paused on the knob. Yes, I said, and for the first time, I think I believe her. I stepped outside. The air felt cleaner, the light steadier. The ending didn't come with shouting or slamming doors. It came with a signature. And the silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was peace. The weeks after blurred together. You'd think the quiet that follows a divorce would feel suffocating, that it would cling like dust in forgotten corners. But for me, it didn't. It felt like stillness, clean, like someone had finally shut off a low hum I hadn't even realized was always there. Madison didn't sign right away. She held on to those papers for weeks. I didn't chase her, didn't call. I let the space between us do what arguments never could, make the choice clear. When they finally arrived, couriered, no note attached, I left the envelope untouched for a day. Not because I doubted, but because I no longer needed answers in a hurry. I had already closed that chapter. Chloe noticed the difference in me before I did. You seem lighter, she said one evening as we walked along the bay, her fingers hooked loosely through mine. Divorce will do that, I said with a half laugh. She shook her head. It's more than that. It's like you finally stopped running. She was right. For years, I had been bracing for the next barb disguised as a joke, flinching at every shift in tone, walking through a minefield with my guard always up. Now I woke up to the smell of pancakes in Chloe's kitchen. I fell asleep beside someone who didn't use my words against me later. I laughed more, checked my phone less. Even work felt lighter. I started sketching again, not for deadlines, but for me. Little ideas, projects that might never leave paper, but reminded me I could still create something that lasted. I built Chloe a deck for her balcony, simple wood, wide enough for 2 chairs and a grill. When she saw it, she cried. This is what it feels like, she whispered, running her hand over the railing. When someone builds something that stays. Her words stayed with me. Madison faded into the background of my life, lingering only in whispers from mutual friends. She wasn't coming to happy hours, looked thinner, laughed less. I didn't feel vindicated. Didn't even feel sad. Some doors don't slam shut, they just stop opening. She texted once, "Can we talk?" I didn't answer. Chloe never brought Madison up, never treated her like a rival or a ghost to compete with. She simply lived in the present and pulled me into it with her. Evenings turned into rituals, vinyl spinning, wine on the porch, conversations that wandered everywhere, childhood fears, favorite constellations, what we'd name a dog someday. One night after dinner, I caught Chloe watching me with the same look she'd worn at that party months ago, right after she'd whispered, "He's awesome." "What?" I asked. She smiled, soft but sure. "Just wondering how long it'll take you to believe you deserve this." I didn't respond. Not because I doubted it, but because for the first time I was starting to believe her. I hadn't planned on seeing Madison again, but not every ending fits neatly into envelopes. Some require words, out loud, final enough to echo. She asked for one last meeting, no lawyers, no drama, just 10 minutes. I walked into that house like a stranger. The walls looked familiar, but the life inside no longer belonged to me. Everything looked familiar, yet nothing felt right. As though reality had shifted slightly overnight, furniture rearranged just enough to unsettle me. She was waiting in the living room, dressed for an evening that held more weight in her mind than in mine. It was the kind of dress that pretended to fix what words had shattered, as if soft lighting and careful fabric could rewind everything we'd ruined. "Thanks for coming," she murmured. I stood for a beat too long, coat still buttoned, before lowering myself into the chair. "What is it you want, Madison?" For just a flicker, I saw her, the woman I used to know, the one who used to curl against me during storms, whispering impossible futures into the dark. But that woman was gone, replaced by someone I couldn't reach anymore. "I thought—" Her voice trembled, nearly breaking. "Maybe we could try counseling, just once. Don't we at least owe ourselves that?" "No." My answer was calm, certain. "We don't." The look in her eyes was sharp, almost violent, like I'd struck her without moving an inch. "I know I hurt you," she said quietly, stepping closer. "I never meant for it to spiral this far. I was angry, lonely. You were never really there." I didn't move. "Lonely?" My voice stayed even. "You mocked me behind my back, Madison. That wasn't loneliness. That was cruelty dressed up in charm." Tears spilled fast. She tried to hide them, as if erasing them would erase the weight behind them. "I never wanted to lose you." "You didn't lose me," I said, rising to my feet. "You showed me the door so many times that one day I finally walked through it." Her lips trembled. "So that's it? You're really done?" I nodded. I was done the moment I realized I wasn't afraid to live without you anymore. I turned toward the door. "Wait!" she cried out, voice breaking. "Adam, she's pregnant!" I froze. The words didn't cut. They weren't weapons. They landed like exhausted truth, heavy and undeniable. "Yes," I said softly. "She's carrying my child." Madison collapsed into the armchair as if gravity had doubled its pull. Then came the scream, raw, guttural, loud enough to rattle the windows, dissolving into jagged sobs. It sounded less like heartbreak and more like mourning something she never valued until it slipped through her hands. I didn't stay to comfort her. That grief didn't belong to me anymore. I stepped outside, closed the door, and let her cries dissolve into silence. Outside, the air smelled like rain and clean beginnings, like something had ended and something better was already waiting. I sat behind the wheel, unmoving for a moment. And then I smiled. Not because she was broken, but because I wasn't. For the first time in years, I felt free. The nursery was still unfinished. Paint samples taped to the wall. Mint, cream, something called soft sky that looked more like seashells. Chloe kept changing her mind mid-brushstroke, and I didn't mind at all. Every new coat felt like a promise we were painting together. She stood in the middle of the room, holding up a tiny onesie with a cartoon giraffe on the front, twisting it in her hands like she was deciphering life's secret code. "This is smaller than my coffee mug," she laughed. "How can something this small change everything?" I looked at her instead of the fabric. "Because it shows us how much space we still have to grow." She raised an eyebrow. "Careful, that's dangerously close to a dad joke." "Get used to it," I said, stepping behind her, wrapping my arms around her waist, resting my palm where new life stirred. She leaned back into me, silent for a moment. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" she whispered. "All the time." We never spoke about Madison anymore. There was no reason to. She belonged to a life I no longer carried, fading further into the rearview mirror every day. People said she'd sold her house, started yoga, deleted half her social accounts. Some said she looked healthier, others said she looked hollow. I never looked for the answer. I wasn't angry, I wasn't waiting for karma. Because real revenge is peace, quiet, ordinary peace. The kind that doesn't need witnesses, the kind that sneaks up on you on a Sunday morning when Chloe is barefoot in the kitchen, dancing and singing into a spoon. The kind that whispers, "You made it out, and you're building again." I kept my last name, but I buried the man I used to be. The man who mistook silence for compromise, who believed surviving pain meant he had to endure it forever. The man who called fear stability because he didn't know any better. That man is gone. The man standing here now builds cribs with steady hands. He walks beside a woman who chooses honesty over control. He values a name spoken gently and a silence that soothes instead of wounds. He watches sunsets from a back porch he built himself, laughing when Chloe reads parenting blogs in ridiculous voices. And sometimes, when the world goes still and the baby kicks against her belly like a promise, he lets himself feel proud. Not bitter, not broken, just proud. Because the cruel joke back then was never about him. It was about a woman who never saw what she had, and the man who finally learned what he deserved. That's where this chapter closes. Tell me what you think in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, there are more waiting on this channel. See you in the next one, friend.